Welcome back to the I Am Passionate podcast. It's your host, Jaron Smith. For those of you who are new here, welcome. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe at the end of the video. If you're listening to this on YouTube, Spotify, I believe you can leave comments, but still, just any interaction, I greatly appreciate. So, I want to talk a little bit about the last week's preseason games. The reason why, just a little bit, is because my sinuses had been bothering me throughout this week, and so my voice was just not really feeling up to my usual standards until about today. My voice is still a little off, but I'd say my voice is about 95% of the way there. But the first takeaway I had is that Shedeur looked good. He didn't have a lot of time with the ones in training camp, and he went out there and played well, threw 2 touchdown passes. He's still number 4 on the Browns roster, which that kind of surprised me a little bit. I didn't expect him to jump up to number 2, but I definitely think he's better than a fourth string quarterback. I do. And the Browns roster is just so mismanaged, specifically with the quarterbacks. They've got basically 6 quarterbacks. They've got Joe Flacco, 40 years old. Also, shout out to Joe Flacco. Only time I won't be rooting for you is when you're playing against the Ravens. They've got Kenny Pickett, who they traded for. They're not going to get rid of Kenny Pickett, like, no matter what you think of him. I would be surprised if they got rid of Kenny Pickett. Like, not even from a skill perspective. They traded for him. Third, Dylan Gabriel, who we have not seen yet in a preseason game, or just NFL action in general. Number 4 being Shedeur. 5 is who they signed, Tyler Huntley. And then 6, even though that he's hurt and likely will not step on the field at all this year, Deshaun Watson. I hope Shedeur will get an opportunity to keep showing, his skills, because I think he's very capable. Second, I'm not going to hit the panic button on the Ravens backup quarterbacks. I thought Cooper Rush signing him in the offseason was a bit odd because he's not exactly a dual threat QB. And that's what the Ravens offense is centered around, being able to, Lamar can stand in the pocket and, dice up a defense, but at the same time, he can be on the run, dice up a defense, or just those unorthodox plays, those like difficult throws, things you just would not expect an average quarterback to do. That's the Ravens offense can do it just because Lamar Jackson is a hell of an athlete. But the Ravens quarterbacks just did not look very good last week. Cooper Rush and Devin Leary, throwing multiple interceptions. I believe Cooper Rush's first pass was intercepted, I believe, and then Devin Leary threw 1. And the Ravens wide receivers, outside of LaJohntay Wessner, who I believe had 2 receptions for 40-something yards, and then he had that great punt return. Outside of him as a receiver, the Ravens wide receivers did not have a chance to really showcase their skills. And so my concern isn't just from a quarterback perspective, my concern is also from a wide receiver perspective, because the wide receivers can't showcase all of their talent if the quarterbacks aren't, delivering the ball, or just, if they're not, playing well, then makes it harder for the wide receivers who are, fighting to make the team. Third takeaway I had is really, I just want to see Caleb Williams play. He's still a young quarterback, and I believe he'd benefit from, some early game action in a new offense. I'm not saying I want him to play an entire preseason game. I'm not saying that at all. I just would like to see him maybe for a quarter, maybe even a half. A half might be pushing it, so maybe just a quarter. I get it. It's very, very likely that he will play in the final preseason game if he does not play, in this week's preseason game. But I just think that, Caleb Williams getting onto the field would be very, very helpful. And I don't want him to turn out like Baker Mayfield his first few years with the Browns, because Baker Mayfield had so many offensive coordinators his first few years with the Browns. And so I don't want Caleb Williams to basically have to learn a new offense every single year of his career. Like, I just think that's insane. Next, the Dolphins' offensive line was of some concern when they were playing against the Bears last week. The moment that stood out is when, they had multiple chances at the goal line to punch it in. Keep in mind, they had their starters in for the moment I'm referring to. They tried, they basically ran the ball 4 times, got stuffed all 4 times. And the Bears are playing their second string defense. So, good sign for the Bears. Bad sign for the Lions, for the Dolphins. And then last takeaway, just prayers up to Maurice Norris. I apologize if I'm saying that name incorrectly. The Lions safety, I believe. Um, his scary situation, late in that game, which, I believe now he is in concussion protocol. So, I'm hoping that, you know, he gets through this okay and, be able to play football and, just be able to, I understand that a lot of football players, they'll have a, bad injury, have a concussion and then just, retire just because concussions are very terrifying. And so I just hope that Maurice Norris has a great career and an even better life. I just hope, I'm hoping for positivity all around. Um, Also, the reaction between the Lions and the Falcons, I love to see that. Just, them taking the power, just because with professional sports, yes, the players have power, but nowhere near as much as, say, the average person would think they would. Because, like, people who sit out, like, because they're trying to get a new contract, they get fined, they lose their money. And so, like, that, that's they have the power to, kind of force the hands of people within the organization, but even so, that still comes with a consequence. Um, so just seeing that, those two teams come together because in that moment, it was bigger than just football because it was scary. So now we're going to focus on the next, aka tonight's preseason games, and then moving forward. So tonight we have two games: the Titans versus the Falcons. So Titans QB Cam Ward, he looked good in his debut. He didn't play too long. He went 5 for 8, 67 yards. He had, a few passes were just he. I can see the chemistry he has with Calvin Ridley, so that might be a decent option fantasy football wise. And also I saw the joint practice footage where Calvin Ridley was having a great week, uh, from what it looked like. And so, not Calvin Ridley, Cam Ward, I feel like he can make the throws. By that I mean, like, he's throwing with touch, getting it over, like a defender who's, like underneath, playing those underneath zones. I believe last week the Bucks, they were in a cover 2 look, and so he had to get it over the flat defender, and then he threw it to the deep out, which I believe went to Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley might have a big season this upcoming year. And so for the Falcons, I don't have too much to say about them, specifically because of the scary injury in their game. But I'm sure, they'll have the chance to, continue to, develop Michael Penix Jr. Just because, again, this is his first true season. Like by that I mean, yeah, he got to play last year, but this is what I like to call an extension of his rookie year. Chiefs versus Seattle. I didn't expect Mahomes to play last week against the Cardinals, but it does make sense because of Andy Reid. Um, but I'd be surprised to see him play tonight, if at all. Um, like if he plays, maybe just the first series of the game, but I have no idea. Jalen Milrow. I didn't talk about him last week because I'll be honest, I kind of had forgotten that he went to Seattle. Like, I just didn't do my homework for that, and I apologize. Like I knew that's where he got drafted, but when I was writing the script for last week, I did not make note that I should have talked about him. But Jalen Monroe did look good last week, in my opinion. The plays looked simple. They didn't ask him to do too much. I feel like they catered to his skill set, which I believe is very, very good for him so that he can, continue to show off his talent. And so Saturday, 11 games. We've got a lot to get through, but at this time, just let me know what you all are thinking about, the NFL right now. By that, I mean, you know, anything that you've been seeing in preseason. Maybe if you're going through fantasy football drafts, I usually do them with my friends every year. Two groups of friends, basically people I would have met while in college, and then people I've known since high school or maybe even before. And so yeah, if they want to do it, I'm down because in the league with my college friends, yeah, I was coming off of championship season, which still surprised I lucked out that much. And then Kevin cursed me. He cursed me. I don't know how he did it, but he cursed me and I fumbled like the team. And I had a great team last year. Like if you listen to some of my early episodes, from last season, I know I'll definitely say my roster in those episodes. but that was a great team that just underperformed week by week by week. And then in my league with high school friends, I made the playoffs, but I lost in the first round. Yeah, the team I just went up against, I was stacked. They were stacked. But this year, I'm getting my get back. I am getting my get back. So Packers versus Colts. I'd say the Colts are the biggest story of this game, considering their quarterback battle. Anthony Richardson got hurt against the Ravens last week and messed up a finger, and Daniel Jones didn't really look good. Daniel Jones has the chance to lock up the starting job for the short term future, but I'm not exactly sure how long he'll keep it. And then for the Packers, the whole team didn't really look that great. Their backups played most of the game, and I'm curious to see how well Jordan Love plays just this season in general, not even just in this game, um, because Jordan Love got a huge contract, and I do think he's a good quarterback. But do I think he deserved the contract he got as of right now? No, I'm not of that. I'm not that believer yet. I think the only people who believe that he deserved that contract are basically people who are either A, Green Bay fans, or B, involved in the Green Bay organization somehow. By that I mean like if you work for Green Bay. Patriots versus Vikings. Trayvon Henderson, one of the Patriots running backs, had a great day. He returned the opening kickoff return for a touchdown, and he had a nice run in limited action. And I get the feeling the Patriots might be like go more old schoolish, like similar to the Vikings, because I feel like both teams this year are going to place an emphasis on running the football. Like the Vikings had a lot of three tight end sets when JJ McCarthy was in the game. And so I get the feeling that they're going to focus on the running game. And so this might be a hot take. I don't know. But I'm not 100% sure. Like if unless he is practically gift wrapped to me, I'm not going to draft Justin Jefferson, which that might come back to bite me somehow. Um like unless in my leagues where basically people are just like he is just there looking at me, staring at me. Of course I'll draft him because I think Justin Jefferson's going to have a good season regardless. Do I think he's going to be the wide receiver number one this year? No, but hey, you never know. Um, so Dolphins versus Lions. Hopefully this is a bounce back week for the Dolphins' own line because I feel like my situation with this is I feel like the Dolphins, they have Hill, unless they decide to trade him, and Waddle, two fast wide receivers. And they can, yes, they can throw a slant route and have one of them take it 80 yards, or they can just throw goal balls and have um Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle just speed past people. But if your offensive line is underperforming, it will make it difficult for your speedsters to just run down the field because Tua's going to be running for his life. Otherwise, like if they just cannot hold up in pass protection, you might as well focus on the run game because you do have Devon Achane, who is also very very fast. So there are ways to scheme around their weaknesses. I'm just curious as to if they'll do it. Browns versus Eagles. I highly doubt the Eagles will play much of their starters, if not any at all. I think this is a good opportunity for Shador. The Eagles last season had a lot of depth, and likely a lot of the players who you will see in their game are potential players who will see some playing time this year. And so Shador, I believe, if he has another good showing, I think he'll further the case as to I belong. You should keep me on this roster, or else they're gonna regret it. If they don't keep him. For the Eagles, I'll be surprised if anybody trades for their backup quarterback, Tanner McKee. He had a great game against the Bengals starters. Their starters played a lot, specifically defensively. Their starters played a lot of during that game, and Tanner McKee was just he was just cooking. And so he might have the chance to be a starter if somebody eventually is desperate enough. And there's usually one team every year that does some sort of desperation move. So I'm curious as to if it'll happen, and if so, will he be the one that benefits? Panthers versus Texans. Bryce Young looked great last weekend, playing with confidence and poise. Always a great sign. It's like he's picking up where he left off. And then the Texans. The one thing in camp I've heard is just how good their defense has been playing. And I feel like the Texans defense is going to be very reliable and cause a lot of problems. And like also, I saw some of the joint practice footage between these two teams, and both teams' defenses were looked pretty good in the practices. Like it's like not one team really gained a particular advantage. Of course, you know, offenses, you know, still shined. Um, and like that, the Panthers pass rush wasn't really getting the CJ Stroud, which I think, you know, the phrase iron sharpens iron. I heard it a lot when I used to play football. You're going up against the best, you have the potential to become one of the best. And so the Texans offensive line, you know, they go up against their defensive line every practice, obviously, and they have a pretty good defensive line. And so, hey, maybe they'll actually have, you know, a bounce back year on the offensive line. And then 49ers versus Raiders, I'm not going to hit the panic button on Ashton Jeanty. Like, literally, did not have good blocking on his carries against Seattle last week. And I saw RG3's video regarding his thoughts on the Raiders trying to change Jeanty's stance. And I agree with his general logic. I think if he continues to struggle in this current stance, like, you know, them trying to switch up his stance, let him go back to what he was doing at Boise State. Like, that's what he was comfortable with. He was the Heisman runner-up. He was very, very close to breaking Barry Sanders' record. I don't see a problem with it just because football is changing so much. And yes, when I first saw Singenti and I saw his stance, I thought it was weird. I'm not gonna lie. But then realizing that he's balling out, so I'm like, hey, if you're balling out with it, hey, he was doing his thing last year. So like, who am I to say that he can't replicate that success to an extent in the NFL or just have that carry over? I'm not saying he's gonna, because I think he rushed for 2,600 yards at Boise State, somewhere in that ballpark. I'm not saying he's gonna get that. I don't think he'd even get close to that, especially as a rookie. But am I to say that I don't think he can't get 1,000 yards in the NFL if he was to go back to his stance in college? I think he can get 1,000 yards. Um, and then for the 49ers, my major concern is the offense. Like I've seen the training camp footage of McCaffrey, which he looked great. You know, it looks like he's comfortable. He's, you know, making cuts. He's running routes out of the backfield. I'm more concerned with the wide receivers. Um, I don't know. It's just Ricky Pearsall. Um, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but I'm just gonna call him Ricky. Will he become the wide receiver number one? I'm not sure how much time Brandon Ayuk will be missing. But I do know in I believe earlier this week in one of the drills, Brock Purdy threw 9 passes. 6 of them went to Ricky Pearsall. That is why I'm like, maybe they just have developed, you know, great chemistry with each other. No idea. Chargers versus Rams. You know, Justin Herbert apparently will get the start on Sunday, so we will get to see a bit of what the starting Chargers offense will look like for a few series. And Matt Stafford for the Rams has had a weird training camp. He's dealing with injuries and not feeling 100%, so that's a little bit concerning. And I saw a video of Jimmy Garoppolo today in practice, and basically the throw he had to Devontae Adams, if it was a live game, it was a hospital ball. He would have got Devontae Adams knocked out of the game. Like that, I mean that defense would have put the hurting on him. Bucks versus Steelers. A lot of the Steelers stars won't be playing, like Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, Cam Hayward is still waiting for his contract situation, and so I do think this will be an important game for the Steelers' depth pieces. You know, like their wide receivers, which I've heard good things about, you know, in training camp so far. Um, the only other thing really I heard about in training camp is that Aaron Rodgers and Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa, they had a moment where I don't know all of the details. I just know words were exchanged. And for the Bucks, don't really have too much to say about them. Just rookie safety J.J. Roberts has had a really good camp, but has had an injury in practice, and I believe he was an undrafted free agent. So you know that's going to make it harder for him to, you know, make the team. But fingers crossed he comes back quickly, safely, and 100%. Jets versus Giants. Both teams had a pretty good showing in their first preseason game. Jackson Dart had a good showing in his first preseason game. Justin Fields and the offense looked good against the Packers. And really, the only other thing to say is I'm rooting for Justin Fields. I think he's got all the talent in the world. I think he just needs a fair shot. Like, I wanted the Steelers to keep him last season, but at the same time, I'm happy as hell they didn't. um, Ravens versus Cowboys. I would, I want to see more from the backup quarterbacks. The Ravens will not know how good their wide receivers are until their backup quarterbacks, you know, play a bit better. They need to find like the guy who can keep the Ravens afloat besides Lamar Jackson. Because like, of course, there was a quote, I believe an offensive coordinator said with Peyton Manning, and I'm not going to use the exact words. Basically, I believe I don't remember who, but somebody asked, "Hey, why isn't the backup getting more reps?" It's like basically the response is that we don't practice messed up. Um, I'll let you kind of decide on the word I did not use there, but it is a four-letter word. That is all I will say. Um, but yeah, and for the Cowboys, all oh actually, going back to Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell had himself a great game, and I believe he looked to be back to 100% to what he looked like in 2023. So shout out to that. And for the Cowboys, all I'm going to keep commenting on each week until it happens is pay Micah Parsons. Pay that man his money. Pay him. If I had the money and if I was a Cowboys fan, I'd pay him. But I mean, Jerry Jones, if you want, you could just trade Micah Parsons for the Ravens for, like, I don't know, a bag of peanuts, some seafood. They got good crab in Baltimore, so like you could do that. That was funny. Cardinals versus Broncos. Um, I don't really have too much to say about the Cardinals other than, I'm hoping that, Marvin Harrison Jr., is kind of the center point of this offense. And for the Broncos, I think Evan Ingram might have the chance to shine this year because he's a good receiving threat, and the Broncos tight ends did nothing. They did nada. So I would not be surprised if once the season starts, if Bo Nix is throwing it to Evan Ingram a lot. He do I think he's gonna have a career year? Maybe. The potential for it is there. Jags versus Saints. According to several news outlets, it's very likely Travis Hunter will miss this game due to an upper body injury. I don't know if this would have happened maybe during the Steelers game or maybe in practice. No idea. But regardless, I hope he recovers soon so he doesn't miss any major time. And then in regards to the Saints, Tyler Show has the chance to lock up the QB1 spot, in my opinion. Against the Chargers, he had a decent showing. Yes, he threw a pick six, but then he responded with I think a 54-yard touchdown pass. So we'll see how he continues to grow and develop. Wrapping up because we literally only have two more games to talk about. Bills versus Bears. Literally before I started recording this episode, I was at work getting ready to leave. And so I saw a video on Twitter where basically the former Bears quarterback Mitch Trubisky was, being interviewed and also talking about, kind of like his experience and also kind of giving some advice to Caleb Williams. And the advice was more just in general advice, not just football advice specifically. And the advice was to just enjoy it. Like that's pretty much really what his advice was being. Like Mitch Trubisky understands that being the quarterback in the city of Chicago, it comes with pressure, which you know quarterbacks for every team, yes. But what makes it different from say a big market team versus a smaller market team, the city itself, because you can have one bad play in a bigger like for example, I think of like Madison Square Garden in the NBA, for example. You can be a role player and maybe have an average like 12 on a season. Then once you get to Madison Square Garden, bro, you might go off for 50. Um, that was a good comparison for like the NFL and being a quarterback for a smaller market team. And I'm not trying to say that the Bills are a small market team. It's just the environment, that like the people that you have to deal with in Buffalo are going to be different than Chicago. Like just considering the history of these franchises, and so I hope I see the Bears starters for at least one quarter. I think that's very very beneficial for the Bears. For the Bills, I don't really have too much to say. Um, I think that I think that their depth will just continue to be a good thing for them. I think that Keon Coleman has the chance to kind of take a step up. Also, I do think Khalil number 10, I believe. I think he's the best wide receiver on their roster. Just what he's able to do for the Bills. He's just so reliable for them. So I would not be surprised if he has his best season of his career. And then lastly, Bengals versus Commanders. I saw a video on Twitter. I'm not calling it by its other name because to me, it's always Twitter. Um, basically people were being mad at Joe Burrow for not signing autographs at like 2 a.m. Shador had a similar situation, but I just want like to express that yes, these are professional athletes, these are celebrities, but they're human too. They're human too. And in regards to the Joe Burrow one, if I was him, I would not be signing autographs at 2 in the morning. Like maybe depending on the night, depending on the week, if I'm seen out, I guess Sunday or Monday night or whatever, then like maybe at like 10 o'clock, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll sign like an autograph or two. But if it's 2 a.m., nah, bro, I'm going to bed. It's night night. It's past my bedtime. Um, but yeah, I don't really have too much to say about that from a football standpoint. Besides for that, also, um, I saw the video of Shamar Stewart. I couldn't quite tell what had happened specifically, but it looked like he accidentally bumped Joe Burrow. I could not quite tell what had happened, but a fight basically broke out. I wouldn't say call it a fight. I'm just gonna call it a scuffle. Um, which one of their offensive linemen made the comment on the situation, basically saying Shamar is a great player, but don't do that. Which I mean, I get it, but like, uh, really, just the two things that I have to say is number one, somebody please tell me what had happened in that footage because I cannot quite tell. Number two, um, just the Bengals offensive line. I don't know the stats. Like last season, I don't have them pulled up. As to how many times Joe Burrow would have gotten sacked or hit. But I hope that Joe Burrow. I'm saying this as a Ravens fan. I hope that Joe Burrow, doesn't take too many hits unless he's playing the Ravens. But I just want to thank you all for watching. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next episode.